Very much for being with us today. It's great to have you here in Fresno.
Well, thanks, Colin.
Great.
I really appreciate you inviting me.
Obviously, your book, Rare, My Daughter's Faithful Journey Through Cancer, is, we're going to talk about, obviously, a very painful event for you and your family. But in reading it, I looked at it, the front page, and you wouldn't probably get that and when you see the title of the book. But in reading in here on the very first page, rare was her cancer, rare was her life, rare was her love, rare was her faith, and rare was my Rebecca. Give us a little bit of background on Rebecca.
I would say Rebecca was a typical teenager at the time. She was 18 when she was diagnosed with cancer, and she was in youth ministry with me, and she was active in the church. But she was very much a typical fun-loving, teenager, and so but there was a quality about her always, this calmness and this peacefulness. And everybody always noticed from the time she was a baby, she used to giggle in her crib, and we always would go, who giggles in their crib? But that was a calmness that I think when cancer came into her life, she was able to apply that peace and calmness of her soul, even through a horrific disease as it is.
She was just a young girl in college, her first year of college?
We found out through a routine checkup. It was just, she wasn't sick or anything, and she was just going away to college the next day. In fact, the car was already packed when we got a diagnosis of cancer, which of course, none of us were in any way, it wasn't on our radar or anything, like she was sick or something.
That's got to be a devastating moment obviously for her and for you and your wife. In the book, you go day to day with what you went through, but what was that feeling? What happened to you in that particular day and to her?
I mean, I was in a meeting, I got out of the meeting, and Nancy called me, and I wasn't expecting anything but oh, hi, how are you, when you coming home, because I was traveling. And she a voice that I never heard Nancy, because of just how surreal it was, and her saying, Rebecca has cancer, come home. And then that flight home where I couldn't communicate and I couldn't talk. And as I was touching down, I said a prayer because I knew my life was forever changed in a moment. And it just started with a simple phone call, but I knew my life had just changed dramatically.
Obviously, going on that trip of going back to the doctors, of course, many times in the treatments, that is a feeling that, thank goodness, not many of us can ever get a handle on. And how did it affect her? Did it change her in any way? According to your book, it didn't, but I mean, there's got to be some changes there that you saw.
I think everybody around her started celebrating life more. I think Rebecca always celebrated life. So I think, people were just amazed at, and then that's what in the book of different things, but I think it was her fourth reoccurrence in the hospital, and the doctor telling her. And the one thing they wrote when they wrote that part of the book is, she said to them is, well, thanks for trying. And they said nobody in 25 years of cancer treatment ever thanked them for failing. Yeah. But that was, Rebecca she knew she could not control her cancer. But what she could control is her day-to-day life and her happiness. And so she went to college, even though we found out the day before, she decided we're moving her in the next day. And she did move in. She wasn't able to complete that first semester, but she completed the next semester and got 5 A's. So, Rebecca just went on with her life. When she was in the hospital, she was in the hospital, when people would comment on that. But I think was just her way of living her life. And none of us know how many days we have, as she reminded me.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. The book, of course, is fascinating, and it's a big book. It's not something that you sit down with at lunch, and it's finished by your break time.
Definitely a novel.
It is a novel, and it's a diary, actually, in my opinion, of your ongoing thing. How did you pull that all together? I presume, was it after everything had happened, or did you start a diary sort of as it went?
It's an in-the-moment book, but it really started 2 weeks after she was diagnosed. I was laying on her bed, and to go back in time, me and her would lay on our bed all the time and talk about writing a book together. And we had storyboarded many ideas. But when I suggested 2 weeks after her diagnosis, Rebecca, we should write a book about this, she of course laughed at me and said, what would we write about? And I said, the journey we're going on, and the shock and the awe. And the more we talked that night, the more she said, yes, Dad, it's important, we should talk. So I started journalizing, and then I remember I interviewed a couple of her friends. If you, in the front part of the book, what were you thinking when Rebecca told you? And Rebecca goes, did you interview my friends? I go, well, yeah, I wanted to get what they were thinking when you told them. So I just kept that process going. But so it was not a remembrance book. It was not intended. We had talked about it, a different ending. And
how did this affect her friends? I mean, obviously she's a young, beautiful young lady, etc., and the future was magnificent. Well, as you say, when you interviewed her friends, how did they were probably shocked and so forth, but did they come to her aid? What was their action?
Her friends were just godsend, and they absolutely participated in the treatment and everything. They were there all the time. Yeah. And when Rebecca couldn't go out, we had a party house, and without exaggerating, every night that Rebecca couldn't go out, her friends were at our house. And there were unfortunately many nights that she could not go out because of the chemotherapy or surgery or radiation. So no, they were always there, and I think both me and Nance always feel sorry for these beautiful young people in the sense of, they weren't prepared for this either, and so but Rebecca answered their questions too, and so she helped them understand nothing bad was happening to her.
How would you recommend to people who have to face this, and there will be people who today are going to face this, somebody's going to give them some terrible medical news or whatever, what would you advise people to do? I mean, you obviously did your thing, but what would be your advice to people?
Well, don't face it alone. And I think I had my network, my family, Nance and Rebecca, but Rebecca had her friends, her brothers. Don't face it alone. I think cancer has like a stigma on it. And oftentimes families or people don't want to talk about it. And I think then the family itself gets eaten away too, that they don't reach out. We took the opposite approach. We told our family, we told our friends. They were intimately involved in our lives, and they should know this. And Rebecca chose that. She told all her friends directly. And so I think I would recommend, we sat down with our parish priest. We sat down and talked about this all the time. And he was at the hospital with us. He was, so it's, we reached out to the people that we trusted to support us. And then, it comes down to your faith. And I questioned a lot of things, but, I didn't question my faith. I just questioned, why is this happening?
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, this happens to, your daughter, a beautiful young lady on the brink of her life. Was that a major test for you in your faith to say, God, why are you doing this to me?
I don't think it was a major test of why. I think the major test was, what is it you want me to do as her father? And what am I supposed to do? I just wanted to know that I was doing what I was supposed to do, and I was doing God's plan with her. Because we didn't know where the journey was going to take us. We assumed Rebecca was going to be cured. Her doctors, were very upbeat. They tried 10 different chemotherapy programs. We just needed one to work, and they tried 10. So, we were optimistic, but I just prayed, to be a good father, to be a good friend, to be a good husband, to, make sure I was there, and to keep Rebecca safe. And as I said, actually I believe my prayers were answered, because when I really thought about what I was praying for, it wasn't really praying for Rebecca to be cured. It was praying for Rebecca to be safe. And I believe she was always safe.
On the flip side of that is the medical treatments, the doctors and the nurses and so forth, the hospitals that you had to go to. I mean, when you go into that, most people are sort of blind to this whole process. Do you have to become almost a medical expert yourself to deal with all the things that are thrown at you and your daughter?
You do, because even with cancer treatment, this is really a fact-based book on that issue, because the doctors and the nurses were very much, they wrote that part of the book. Because we wanted it to be realistic to what a family and what modern treatment is. And we didn't want to pull any punches, and they agreed to do that, which I thank them for that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I had to become like an instant expert. You know, when they read a drug, and well, what is this drug going to do to her body? And unfortunately, it was always hideous. You know, every time we did research, there was nothing good about the research we did. But at least it prepared me for, okay, this is the side effects of that drug. This is what, and when you know, and at some point, Rebecca, about probably 15 months into her treatment, she passed away after 19 months in her treatment. She didn't really want to participate overly with the doctors. And so I started becoming the person that she wanted me to communicate directly with. And the doctors understood. She had seen them so many times. She had been through so many surgeries. You know, she just wanted to enjoy life. And so I had to also be the person, you know, trying to work with the doctors about what's the next program, what are they thinking, should we contact any other doctors, and so yeah, I became a lot more of an expert on cancer than I would ever want it to be.
That's got to be an endless trail of futility in some ways, because you want to find more, you want to do more, and in some ways you can't. You can only do what the doctors will allow you or recommend that you do. So there's got to be a frustration on your part too. Why can't they do something here?
I knew, because I knew the team of doctors she had was doing everything for her, and she knew that. Mm-hmm. And to give the example of that would be, when it got to about 3 months before she passed away, they were running out of options. It was clear they were running out of options. And they asked me and talked about experimental programs. And so we talked, and I presented it to Rebecca. And she said, would my doctors be able to administer these treatments? And I said, no, they would not be able to do these. And she said, no, I'm not interested. If whatever they can do, whatever they recommend, I trust them. So that gave me a lot of trust that she trusted them that way. Mm-hmm. And she wasn't looking for, you know, some wild idea. She believes in her team of doctors, and they believed in her. Mm-hmm. And you know, they tried to give her a chemo about 6 weeks before she passed away. And it was not probably a recommended treatment in some sense. She was very weak, but they wanted to try everything, and she accepted that. She talked about it. She said, if you're recommending it, then I understand it'll make me sick, but I'll do it if you recommend it. Mm-hmm.
There has to be a roller coaster, you know, through this. Where were her highs during this time? Did she reach some peaks and was embracing, obviously, life a lot differently?
Well, she decided, like I said, she got 5 A's. She's completed a whole semester, and she was sick during that semester. And she told me after the fact she knew her cancer was back, but she decided. But you know, she went to football games. She went to concerts. She whenever she could go out to eat, she went out to eat. She traveled. So you know, I think Rebecca just went on. There was we were supposed to stop for lunch after her radiation treatment, and she was too sick to even stop for lunch, and I got upset. And she kind of looked at me and said, Dad, why are you upset? And I was like, well, Rebecca, we can't even just stop and have a simple lunch. You're too sick. And it bothers me. As your father, we just can't do that. And she said, Dad, do you realize how many days I've had since I've found out about my cancer? Do you know how much I've lived my life since then? So she knew there was a clock ticking, but she also knew the beauty of every day. Mm-hmm. And I think, so her celebration, I tried to see if she wanted to do, if she had a bucket list. And I say this, it's not an easy story to tell as a father, but about 3 weeks before Christmas, about 3 months before she passed away, she just finished her one treatment. I said, hey, Beck, I've got all the vacation in the world. Why don't we jump on planes? I always wanted to stand in front of a pyramid and walk on the Great Wall of China, go to Jerusalem. And she kind of saw through me, Colin, and said, no, it's Christmas time, Dad. I like being home for Christmas. My friends are home. So her bucket list was being home for Christmas. Her bucket list was being with her friends and family.
She was teaching you, it sounded like, quite a bit.
There's many stories in there about her teaching, not only us, but people around her.
Right. What about, what did she want to accomplish? You know, she was going to college. Where did she want to go? What career did she want to get into?
She wanted to get a master's in audiology and help children that have hearing impairments. And so she was taking sign language, and she just thought that was a wonderful thing, that if you could put an implant in, and that child could hear for the first time. What a wonderful thing to be there that day. She'd go, won't it be great, Dad, when I'm there that day and they hear sound for the first time? I was like, yeah, that will be great.
True. As an interfaith minister, just what do you do when you go out through your ministry?
Our ministry is on faith, loss, and God's grace. So I talk about those three things, that no one wants, I struggle, Colin, many days. So I'm human, I struggle many days. But I also understand God's grace, and I understand Rebecca understood God's grace. When I was waiting for her to break down, honestly, and I say this story again, it's a hard story, I felt she was going to break down, and I wanted to be strong as her father. So I never cried in front of her. 4 days before she passed away, the breakdown occurred, but it was me that broke down, and I started crying. And she just looked at me with a calmness and said, Dad, why are you crying? And I blurted out, there was other people in the room, and I just blurted out, Rebecca, leave me alone. I'm feeling sorry for myself, just leave me alone. And she goes, Dad, you of all people know nothing bad is happening to me. So it's that calmness of faith. She didn't want to die. So you wouldn't go through the treatment she went through if but she also had a calmness of acceptance. And that's what a lot of the people documented around her those last few days, is they did have those type of conversations with her. And she answered the same way, is nothing bad is happening to me. It's
Obviously,
okay.
in her life around you and your wife, etc., she had found this peace and was building up, obviously, to the inevitable that she could see coming.
Yeah, I mean, she saw it coming in a way that, Nancy asked her right around that same time, Rebecca, are you afraid to die? And she just smiled at us in the room and said, no, Mommy, I've never been afraid to die. I've tried everything to stay here, but that's not God's plan for me. She had some connection, some knowledge that gave her the ability to, because she was in tremendous pain at that time, but she seemed to be able to put that on the side and just stay connected to her happiness and her feeling of faith inside. So that's what I talk about.
Yeah, and you travel about the country and the world, or just the US?
Just the country so far.
Just the country. And what feedback do you get from your visits to other parts of the country when you talk about this? What kind of response do you get?
We never knew who was the target audience to read the book. But clearly it wasn't what I envisioned. People have come up to us and contacted us through our website and just thanked us so much for writing the book because of the honesty, the truth, and the beauty of the story. I mean, people who had other diseases have come, found us and said, thank you for writing the book. I have MS, and the book helped me. And I was kind of talking to this woman, and she goes, no, I feel so different after reading your book that I know I have my disease, but I have my faith, and I'm okay. So it's that kind of reaction that I didn't expect. And then a mother that lost her child to cancer found us, and she read the book, and she said, thank you for writing, because you wrote our story too. Her daughter and Rebecca were the same kind of gentle souls, and she said she prepared us just like Rebecca prepared you.
It's funny how the patients help the rest of the family go through traumas like this.
Yeah, and again, I'm glad Rebecca did that for me, because unfortunately I really needed that. I was thinking to lows, and I was really thinking, I don't want this to happen. So it helped me tremendously to know she never did break down, and she just stayed calm and peaceful and happy. On her last day, she was drinking, when our father, Greg, in the book, visited her last day, and she was drinking grape soda and talking to him. And when I interviewed him, and he said, well, that day was that he kissed her and said he loved her. And I said, why'd you kiss her? And he goes, well, that day was different. And I said, well, did you know it was her last day? And he's like, no, she was sitting up drinking grape soda. But he said he felt of God with her and a calmness with her. And that a lot of people documented that they felt that with her.
Mm-hmm. But again, I would imagine yourself going through this, even though your faith is there, that you must have said many, many times, God, why are you doing this to me and my family? It's got to be.
Yeah, and I'm
the
clearly,
honesty, the honesty
I think
of it.
there's, when the editor was trying to edit with me, and that took a year to edit the book, the editor says, I finally figured out what the problem is. And I says, okay, enlighten me what the problem is. And she said, you're trying to compete with your daughter. Tell your story and the pain you're going through, and let her tell her story, which was completely different. We included her emails in the book, we included all the stories. And I understood what the editor was saying was, I was trying to bring my emotion into Rebecca and questioning, well, why, if I'm sad today, and I'm upset today, and I'm low today, why aren't you that way?
Right. Yeah.
And once we figured out to separate, let everyone tell their own story, I think that's what made the book different.
Yeah. I want to revert back to the first day then that you found out about this. Again, no warning, and there's nothing there that alerted her or you to this possibility. What kind of a child was she growing up to that point? We did youth ministry, we did soccer. I was her coach for 5 years. We did Indian Princess. So she very much, our relationship was very close. She loved to do things with her daddy. But her and her mom were, I couldn't think of two people on this earth that had a closer relationship than Nancy and Rebecca. Rebecca was always wanted to participate in the family. And she was the middle child between her two brothers, and she had such a strong relationship with the two of them. So growing up, she was, I think every cousin of hers, everyone always said, oh, Rebecca's different. And what they meant by that is, Rebecca is just happy and Rebecca's joyful. Yeah. And that was true from the moment she was born. But people noticed that about her, not just that it was true, but they actually noticed throughout her life. Her teachers and everyone says, oh, Rebecca's just a joy in the class. I just love her to death. And love was a word we heard about Rebecca probably 100 times. How did this affect her two brothers? Obviously, they're seeing their sister here. What effect did it have on them?
Somewhere between, at some points, devastating because she was so close to them. She was really the glue in both of their lives. But they had a lot of conversations, some of which I didn't know about until I actually, and I think, they understand loss at a different level than I would say me, because that was their sisters that they interact with, goofed around, and our youngest son is getting his PhD to be a medical physicist, which has a correlation into cancer treatment. So obviously it affected him in a way that he wanted to dedicate his life to something like that. And our older son, I think his spirituality with Rebecca in that, which I didn't always know, he saw spirituality different because of her spirituality.
People don't like to talk about cancer, especially because the word scares people. How do you tell people to really, or any other devastating disease that their family, how do you counsel them on, I hate the word to use accept it, but I guess you have to. Cancer is not something that you can throw away. But what do you do with people who come to you for that message?
A lot of it comes because I did the speaking engagement, and people will approach me or contact us. And a lot of it is, what I find is people really have not told a lot of people. Or they don't tell necessarily the truth, meaning they know the treatment's not going well, but they don't say that. Because saying the words out loud, Rebecca understood where her treatment was going, and she understood a relapse was not a good thing. So when I'm out speaking, I think I always tell people, well, who do you talk to? Who do you open up to? Who do you share this with? And and that's the biggest thing I recommend is you have to open up. You have to share this. Don't let this eat you up inside. Cancer is bad enough, but don't let all these feelings you have. And so that's the advice people thank me for is, and then I love when someone says, I told my brother, I'm like, oh, because there are people that have never told their family members they found out they have cancer.
It's such an ugly word, I guess.
It is an ugly word.
And it has so much ramifications. But again, your advice is, again, to talk about things that are not just cancer, but other things that are in your life. You talk about them. You get them out and talk to your priest, talk to your friends, your relatives, and try to move this along.
Yeah, Rebecca's, one of her comments was about the word cancer. She goes, Dad, it's misspelled. And I says, what do you mean? She says, it should be a 4-letter word.
She had a great sense of humor, that's for sure.
Oh, she did.
So, but again, this took you, what, about a year to write, you said, after you started? To pull it together?
No, the whole process took like 3 years after she passed away. Because you go through a very formal edit process and publishing and publishers and that. So it took a while, a lot, because I was naive too, and I'm going through the process. But, a lot of people came out of the woodwork to help us. And just like being here with you is part of the help. But a lot of people just really supported the effort and still do.
And when they find this on the bookshelves, they need to look at this beautiful young lady on the front. But the title, as they said, throws you off a little bit. Rare is there until you read the description on the side here. But it's a great book, and I hope that folks will go pick it up and read. It's on the bookshelves.
It's available in Barnes & Noble. I think most people are downloading it from iTunes.
Oh, okay.
Because we got it accepted in iTunes, and it seems like a lot of people love the download because the pictures are intertwined in the story. And so I think then our website is rarebooks.pc.com, and a lot of people seem to order to the publisher that way.
Great, great. Well, we thank you very much for being with us and sharing the life of this extraordinary young lady, and of course your family life. I can't imagine having to go through it and then sit down and write it. On top of that, that's got to be sort of double jeopardy, you might say, in getting this done. But
when people talk about writer's block, I have many times when I just could not write about that day or that event.
Yeah, but it's as I said, it's like a diary. You go through the different chapters, and it's a fascinating book, an eye opener, and again, we wish you well with it.
Well, thank you.
Should be part of every hospital reading, I guess, in some ways. So, Paul, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Colin.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and good luck with the book, and we'll all say a prayer for this young lady.
Well, thank you.
Okay.